Our topic for the next hour and 15 minutes is going to be Freemasonry, Satan's wellspring of paganism. And there's been several definitions brought forth of Freemasonry, and I'm going to throw another one into the pot. This is from the Indiana Monitor. And in the Indiana Monitor, this definition of Freemasonry is given. Modern Freemasonry is, in the truest sense, a reservoir into which the cult lore and social experiences of countless eons of human experience have poured their treasures. Isn't that amazing? Let me run that by you again. Modern Freemasonry is, in the truest sense, a reservoir into which the cult lore and social experiences of countless eons of human experience have poured their treasures. And we're going to be expounding upon that definition for the next hour or so. And we're going to start where Satan started, with the fall of Lucifer. And we're going to go from the fall of Lucifer to the formation of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. And as Stephen Sakalis said, there is no historical connection between the mystery religions and between modern Freemasonry, but there is a spiritual connection. And that's what we're going to be showing. We're going to be beginning with the fall of Lucifer, and we might think of it as a spiritual mantle being passed from one group in secret society to another. And as the Indiana Monitor explains, Freemasonry, when it was formed with the Grand Lodge of England in 1717, it became a reservoir that collected and systemized the teachings of the mysteries. And it was, in the truest sense, a reservoir that collected this paganism from the very fall of Lucifer. And from Freemasonry, it interpreted it, it set it in symbols, it systemized it, and it also dispensed it into a number of other secret societies and organizations. And literally, from this reservoir, to use their words of cult lore, it has spread throughout our Western civilization. And basically, that's what we're going to be doing in the next hour and 15 minutes. We're going, and as you know, from when you go from the fall of Lucifer till the second coming of Christ, that's a pretty big panorama. So we're going to be hitting the high points, and certainly all along the way, there's a lot more that could be said at a lot of points. But we're going to try to give you an overview of Satan's plan and also of God's plan. But Freemasonry. Now, this is our thesis statement. Satan is alive and is at work in the world to bring about his master plan. His influence can be seen as a series of threads which run in a convoluted fashion through various groups over time. These threads are woven into a common fabric of evil. Few organizations have been influenced by Satan to a greater degree than the organization of Freemasonry. And I might add, there's never been a more instrumental tool in the hand of Satan. Freemasonry has spawned numerous other occult organizations. When history is examined, it is obvious that Satan has used Freemasons to further many of his purposes. Freemasonry is a wellspring of paganism. Now, this is basically a chart of where we're going to be going. From the fall of Lucifer to the mystery religions, which has been talked about, to the Kabbalah, which has also been talked about, to the Knights Templar, to operative Masonry, to Rosicrucianism, and then to Freemasonry and the formation of the Grand Lodge in 1717. And then we're going to be moving on. And this is a chart that Larry and I have come up with, and this will take us from Freemasonry and the foundation of the Grand Lodge in 1717 down to the present day, and even beyond that to the return of the Lord and the establishment of the Antichrist and the New World Order. And as you see, we've got about 5 different strains of thought that have come down from the Grand Lodge of England and ultimately from Satan. We'll be going down the humanistic, philosophical, religious wing of things through the World Council of Churches on down to the false prophet. There's the false cults and the false religions, Mormonism, Christian Science, Jehovah's Witnesses. We'll come down through the secret orders of the Illuminati, the New Age wing of Theosophy, co-masonry, and on. And over to the far right, we're going to talk about the harder groups, Golden Dawn, OTO, and modern Satanism. And we're going to show that through all of this, and this is pretty much a panorama of modern paganism and modern expressions of Antichrist thinking, we're going to show how it originated and disseminated through, to use the Lodge's own words, their reservoir of occult and pagan tradition. And you know, this is their own words. You know, they admit and even are proud of the fact in the Indiana Monitor that they are this reservoir of cult lore. Now, we're going to begin now with the fall of Lucifer, and we're going to be coming down. This is a familiar scripture to many of you. Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 through 14. We could also call this, as it oftentimes is, the 5 I wills. 5 times Satan said, I will. And he wanted to ascend to the congregation to the side of the north. And what I believe Lucifer was in heaven, I believe we could have likened him to the worship leader in heaven. He led the heavenly worship. And in the north, in Freemasonry, there's no great lights. Isn't that interesting? And in Luciferian religion, of course, in the east, and I hate it, we have quality in east up here. Isn't that terrible? We should cover that up. But the worshipful master, of course, you're working toward the east. There's no great lights in the north. And of course, in Luciferian occult religions, they're waiting for their king, Lucifer, to ascend and take his seat in the north. And of course, there's no great lights in Freemasonry in the north. Now, in Genesis, it says this, Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And of course, this was the lie of Satan. That's the New Age lie, that we can become gods. Gnosticism has been talked about also. And of course, this is the Gnostic teaching, which just came from the mysteries. And the same as the New Age, there's a divine spark within everybody. The problem, according to the New Agers, is not sin, it's just lack of intelligence. And when we, through occult techniques, can just realize we're God, everything will be fine. But of course, this is just Satan's original lie. It goes on, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. And this is where it all began. And it not only began there, but we know that it is still continuing. 1 Timothy 4:1. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. And this is nothing but a continuation of what began with the fall of Satan. And what we're going to be doing is just picking up that historical thread that runs from the fall of Lucifer and then to the mystery religions. Now, this is Indiana Monitor and Freemasons Guide, published by the Grand Lodge of Indiana. After this, we're just going to refer to it as the Indiana Monitor. Now, Freemasonry and the mystery religions from the Grand Lodge of Indiana. It is not within the scope of this short essay to develop the substantial evidence which supports Freemasonry's kinship with such ancient cults and societies as the ancient mysteries of Greece, the Roman colleges of artificers, Roman collegia, or the Commissene masters, which are among the more prominent of many others. The student will find this expertly and fascinatingly discussed in many of the excellent books to be found in all Masonic libraries, and he will be amply rewarded for having read them. Having established numerous evidences of the relationships mentioned above, they conclude such evidences of Masonry's share in the common stock of the world's cult phenomena, if rightly understood, make plain many things which have been obscure. How true it is. In another place, as I read to you, they use the term the occult reservoir. Here they say it's necessary to understand Masonry's share in the common stock of the world's cult phenomena. And this again is right from the Grand Lodge of Indiana, right from their monitor. And there's definitely, and we could put many quotes. We could wear you out all day long with the connections that are there between Freemasonry and the mystery religions. And from the mystery religions, we go to the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah, during the time when the children of Israel were captive in Babylon, the children of Israel were like good Americans. They liked to compromise their religion just a little bit. And when they were in Babylon, there was a compromise between the Jewish religion and the religion of Babylon. And this became more or less a series of writings that could be called an occult interpretation of the Old Testament. And these writings become known as the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah could rightly be understood as a bridge between the ancient mystery religions and the Western esoteric tradition as we find it in all of the Western world. The Kabbalah is what brought the mystery teachings not only into Masonry, but into all of the modern occult practices, ritual magic, Satanism, witchcraft, or whatever form it might manifest itself. And as we'll see, it's just all basically the same thing repackaged for different people. I think Satan tries to give something for everybody, and he's packaged it's basically the same thing, but he's got different strokes for different folks. But basically, when you look at witchcraft, Satanism, New Age, and Masonry, there's very little difference. It's just a matter of how it is expressed and how it's practiced. But this is the New Age magazine, which was the official organ of the Supreme Council, 33rd degree, Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And the name has now been changed to the Scottish Rite Journal because of a lot of the people like us that have exposed a lot of the connections. I think it was about 1989 that the name of this magazine was changed. So there is a connection between Freemasonry and the New Age. But this is what it says in the Scottish Rite official magazine. It says, Albert Pike devotes some 90-odd pages to the teaching of the Kabbalah. References to this ancient literature start as early as the apprentice degree and are progressively increased until the master of the royal secret, 32nd degree, is closed. There's also a manuscript in the House of the Temple that's some 250 pages long that's handwritten by Albert Pike himself with his own pen. That is a commentary on the Kabbalah, and I'm sure that this is not accessible to people like us, but it does exist. It goes on to say, references to the book of Zohar and its various parts occur more than 150 times in Morals and Dogma. Admission is made by Albert Pike that Freemasonry is a search after light. That search leads us directly back, as you see, to the Kabbalah. And there's no doubt that the basis of Scottish Rite is Kabbalistic and Luciferian. And as we'll show, this comes right from the works of some of the leading black magicians of all time, Eliphas Levi in particular. But from the Kabbalah, and we get a historical progression here. The mystery religions, you go all back, we've heard about them in Sunday school, Chemosh and Moloch, and the cults of child sacrifice. It came down, they called them different names in Greece, they called them different names in Rome, the Dionysian rites, the rites of Bacchus, but it was all basically the same thing. It's what Stephen was talking about at the end of Dwayne's presentation, and I think most of you are familiar with what the mystery religions are. Then the Kabbalah made the bridge. It was the tool that made this occult tradition, enabled it to pass over and repackaged it for our consumption, more or less. But the Knights Templar, they were a group of knights that originally were formed for a pretty good purpose. They were formed to protect the pilgrims that were traveling to Jerusalem. But as we know from the history of the Knights Templar, that they run into trouble. This is a book entitled The History of Magic by Eliphas Levi. And this is what Mr. Levi said about the Knights Templar. The History of Magic, of course, here's a little introduction, explanation of the book. The History of Magic was written by Freemason Eliphas Levi. Levi is the pen name of Abbe Louis Constant, 1801 to 1875. The book was written in French and has been translated into English by the Masonic adept Arthur Edward Waite. This is what he says about the Knights Templar. The Templars had two doctrines, and this goes back to what Dwayne said. He talked a lot about this. The Templars had two doctrines. One was concealed and reserved to the leaders, being that of Johannism. The other was public, being Roman Catholic doctrine. They deceived in this manner the enemies that they hoped to supplant. The Johannism of the adepts was the Kabbalah of the Gnostics, but it degenerated speedily into a mystic pantheism, carried even to idolatry of nature and hatred of all revealed dogma. They went so far as to recognize the pantheistic symbolism of the Grand Masters of Black Magic, and the better to isolate themselves from obedience to a religion by which they were condemned beforehand, they rendered divine honors to the monstrous idol Baphomet, even as of old the dissenting tribes had adored the golden calf of Dan and Bethel. And they got into many practices that were very perverted. And the important thing, I want to read a quick quote from Morals and Dogma on page 820. And according to Albert Pike, the first Scottish Rite lodges were formed by the Templars. This is what Mr. Pike says. He says, the end of the drama is well known, and how Jacques de Molay and his fellows perished in the flames. But before his execution, the chief of the doomed order organized and instituted what afterward came to be called the occult, hermetic, or Scottish Masonry. In the gloom of his prison, the Grand Master created 4 metropolitan lodges, at Naples for the east, at Edinburgh for the west, at Stockholm for the north, and at Paris for the south. So as you see, the Knights Templar, and once again we could say a lot more about the Knights Templar, but in this group we have another important bridge that takes us toward the passing down of this spiritual mantle. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the left-hand draft of this chart. We're going to talk about the humanistic philosophical strain here and how it comes down through humanism and philosophy, and a little bit of the philosophy and teaching of humanism. According to Protagoras, the Greek philosopher, man is the measure of all things. And of course, this is what motivated Satan to say, I will 5 times, exerting his will above that of God. According to William Henley's poem Invictus, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Humanism's goal is to put man on God's throne. Humanists see themselves as masters of the universe rather than as guests in it. And that's a pretty good explanation of what humanism is all about. Now, humanism and Rosicrucianism. And Rosicrucianism is an important link in the passing of the mantle from the ancient mysteries directly into the Grand Lodge of England. Now, from the Rosicrucian Manual, it says this: in ancient rituals, we find this as part of the Rosicrucian pledge. Man is God and Son of God, and there is no other God but man. So, Rosicrucian philosophy and the philosophy of humanism, what difference is there? There's really not any. And there's not a bit of difference between what they're saying here and what Satan said when he said 5 times, I will, and exalted his will against that of God. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about some famous humanists that were Freemasons. And this is a fella, his name is a household word, Jacques Casanova. He was a Freemason, he was an occultist, he was a spiritist, and he had a paganistic sexual lifestyle. And as you can see, old Jacques, I don't know, he looks like he might have had some problems. But Jacques, to this day, to be a Casanova means to have a loose, immoral lifestyle. And few people know that this comes right from this famous Freemason. Now, Casanova was in 18th century France. And we're going to focus here for just a little bit, because in the 18th century in France, there were a lot of Freemasons that really did a lot. They come together in a little group, and they did a lot to really push Freemasonry and the occult into the ascendancy in modern culture. And we're going to talk about another fella here, Voltaire. And Voltaire made hating Christianity publicly popular. And his war against Christianity, in one of the history books I read about Voltaire, one of the titles of one of the chapters was his war against Christianity. And Voltaire succeeded in making anti-Christian philosophy popular among the elite of 18th century French society. And according to Voltaire, he said, another century there will not be a Bible on earth. But if you have Wilmington's Guide to the Bible, which is a standard reference work, in Wilmington's Guide to the Bible, it tells the story of how after his death, they bought Voltaire's printing press, and it was used to print and distribute Bibles and Christian literature. So Voltaire did not have his way. Unless he had a miraculous deathbed repentance, he's in hell at this moment. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche, who coined the very influential God is dead philosophy, which has come down, and in the 60s it was very influential in the apostasy that came into the church and into the modern anti-established movement. But that was coined by Friedrich Nietzsche, who was also a Freemason, 1844 to 1900. And Voltaire, who lived 1694 to 1778, made the statement, if God didn't exist, man would have to invent him. And we'll also see how this thinking crops up and reoccurs, that of man inventing God. And you'll be interested to know, but not surprised, where this will turn up. This is one of the greatest Masonic philosophers of all time. If you've studied Masonry at all, you've heard of Mr. Albert Pike. He said this: God was first recognized in the heavenly bodies and in the elements. When man's consciousness of his own intellectuality was matured, and he became convinced that the internal faculty of thought was something more subtle than even the most subtle elements, he transferred that new conception to the object of his worship, and deified a mental principle instead of a physical one. In every case, he, in every case, makes God after his own image. Thank you, Voltaire. For do what we will, the highest efforts of human thought can conceive nothing higher than the supremacy of intellect. Now think about what he's saying here. Listen to this. The highest efforts of human thought can conceive nothing higher than the supremacy of intellect. That is nothing but pure humanism. That is nothing but jumping on the train that was set in motion by hell itself and was made popular in 18th century France by Voltaire. That's pure humanism from Mr. Albert Pike. And you can see this, how these strains of every major occult thought and practice was, as they said, collected in the reservoir of Freemasonry and just gushed out into modern society. Now, Manly Palmer Hall, in Lectures on Ancient Philosophy, he said this, in the words of an ancient philosopher, but he who knows all that can be known by intellectual energy is a god among men. In other words, the biggest humanist is the biggest duck on the pond. Man's status in the cosmos is determined, therefore, by the quality of his thinking. Manly Palmer Hall. Now, we're going to dwell for just a little bit, and as we know from the Knights Templar, the operative Masons played an important role. They were the ones that actually built the temples in the medieval times, and they were the ones that laid the foundation for the structure of Freemasonry with the grips and the handshakes and all of this. And they were also an important link. And in 1717, they began to allow not only people that actually built temples, but what they called speculative Masons to become a part of these lodges. But we'll talk now for just a little bit about the Rosicrucians, and we'll see the very important part that the Rosicrucians played with the formation of the Grand Lodge of England in 1717. Now this is from Manly Palmer Hall, Lectures on Ancient Philosophy. Mr. Hall was eulogized in the Scottish Rite Journal as Masonry's greatest philosopher. He said this, "The Secret Doctrine," and this was the title of a book that Larry Kunk wrote, and also of a presentation he has on video. And he explains very well what the secret doctrine is. And the secret doctrine is very much taught within Freemasonry, as Larry's book and video points out. And this doctrine is that through initiation in occult practice, man can become a god. Just the same as the basic New Age teaching. And this is nothing but the teaching that was started in Genesis 3 by Satan himself, and was passed down through the mantle of the mystery religions and collected in the reservoir of Freemasonry. But Mr. Hall says the secret doctrine that flows through Masonic symbols, and to whose perpetuation the invisible Masonic body is consecrated. Isn't that sweet? Has its source in three ancient and exalted orders. The first is the Dionysiac artificers, the second is the Roman collegia, and the third, the Arabian Rosicrucians. So we can see that there's a connection between this secret doctrine from the mysteries to the Rosicrucians. Now, Manly Palmer Hall also says in Lectures on Ancient Philosophy, several initiated Rosicrucians were brought from the mainland to England, where they remained for a considerable time designing the symbolism of Freemasonry and incorporating into the rituals of the order the same divine principles and philosophy that had formed the inner doctrine of all the great societies from the time of the Eleusiniana in Greece. So we can credit the Rosicrucians for actually taking the secret doctrine of the ancient mysteries and putting it into symbols and embedding it into the Masonic ritual. At that point, as the Indiana Monitor says, it became a reservoir for all of this cult lore and tradition. And as the Monitor also says, if you don't understand Masonry's role in this occult lore, you won't really understand what Masonry is all about. Now, we're going to go down, move on to the chart, and show the role that the Illuminati played in the dissemination of the occult. Now, the Illuminati is the organization that everyone talks about, but no one seems to know much about. But this is a picture of Adam Weishaupt, who is the founder of the Illuminati. While an undergraduate, Weishaupt studied the ancient pagan religions and was familiar with the Eleusinian mysteries and the theories of the Greek mystic Pythagoras. As a student, he had drafted the constitution for a secret society modeled on the pagan mystery schools. But it was not until he was initiated into Freemasonry that Weishaupt's plan for the ultimate secret society was spawned. And Weishaupt was a big thinker. He laid the foundation in Illuminism, and we could go all the rest of the evening on Mr. Weishaupt and his plans. But through his thinking, he saw how that through secret societies and Freemasonry, the ultimate utopian society, which we today as Christians, we would call this the push toward the New World Order, the ultimate global New World Order, which is the dream of the modern globalist. But this was from Michael Howard's book, The Occult Conspiracy. Now here's another fellow that we need to mention. His name was Cagliostro, and he was the most ardent Illuminist evangelist. He took the doctrine of Illuminism, in other words, the teaching that actually brought these occult practices into the lodge, where these occult practices of man being God, they had lodges that were called Illuminist lodges, and they had lodges that were not Illuminist lodges. In other words, with the push of Mr. Cagliostro from Adam Weishaupt, the occult was disseminated big time in open practice throughout Masonic lodges all over Europe, particularly in France and in Germany. Now, Count Alessio di Cagliostro had been inducted into Freemasonry in Germany and was also an initiate of the Illuminati. On an esoteric level, Cagliostro's contribution to the occult tradition was the creation of Egyptian Freemasonry. This, he claimed, returned Masonic symbolism to its rightful position as the center point of the ancient Egyptian mystery lodges. Ancient Egyptian mysteries. Lodges were established in Germany, France, and England, practicing a combination of Egyptian Masonry, Kabbalism, and ceremonial magic, also from Michael Howard, The Occult Conspiracy. So what Mr. Cagliostro did, he brought the practice of Kabbalism and ceremonial magic right into the lodges with his Illuminism. Now, you can still see the Egyptian influence within Freemasonry to this day. And this is a picture of the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., and the snakes and the Sphinx. And anyone that's ever been to the House of the Temple, you know, or a lot of other Masonic buildings, the strong Egyptian influence to this day. Now, this fella, Comte Saint-Germain, 1710 to 1784. He's another Freemason that was in this little group. And Cagliostro and Weishaupt, Germain, and Casanova, they were all contemporaries, and they all knew one another in this little group. And the push in 18th century France toward occultism gave birth to the 19th century French occultist, primarily Eliphas Levi, who really done a number with his teachings. But he claimed to be hundreds of years old, and he claimed to be sustained by an elixir. And when he was in public in these meetings of royalty, he would never eat. And he would sit at these meals where everyone was eating, and he would never eat. And he, of course, he was a liar and a charlatan, but he would claim he was also a very immoral womanizer like Casanova, but he would claim to be hundreds of years old, and he was a great storyteller and this, that. He was just a con man, Mason occultist, but he had a tremendous influence among the elite of 18th century French society. And according to Manly Palmer Hall in the Phoenix, he was constantly assisting his friends and found time in his busy life to instruct Anton Mesmer, another Freemason, in the rudiments of mesmerism and to initiate Count Cagliostro into the Egyptian rite of Freemasonry, as Cagliostro himself testifies in his memoirs, Authentique. Now, as you can see, you'll be glad to know Comte might be dead and gone, but he still speaketh. And there's a group out near Yosemite Park called the Church Universal and Triumphant by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and they still claim to be channeling the Comte Saint Germain, Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And of course, I hope you know I'm kidding. They're not really channeling him. They're just contacting demons that they think are Mr. Germain. But to this day, among New Agers and occultists, Saint Germain is a legendary figure that they look upon with reverence. And many New Agers still claim to be in contact with many of these fellows because they're legendary occultists. And we're going to go now from the Grand Lodge of England in 1717 down through the occult, theosophical, and co-Masonic New Age leg of the thing here. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the foundation of the Theosophical Society, which is very important to the understanding of the modern New Age movement. These are the three founders of the Theosophical Society. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who was also a Freemason. She was a member of co-Masonry, which was legitimately chartered from the Grand Orient of France. And it would allow men and women both in the lodge meetings. And you can imagine what that led to. Bill Schneblin could tell you about that. And the other two gentlemen here, Henry S. Alcott and William Q. Judge, were also Freemasons. And before the foundation of the Theosophical Society, Albert Pike was involved in meeting with these people. But Pike was not listed as one of the actual founders of Theosophy, but he was involved. Now, these are a couple of the ascended masters that Helena Petrovna Blavatsky claimed to channel, the Master K.H. Kuthumi and the Master M. And this is a big forerunner to the modern New Age movement. Madame Blavatsky is considered by New Age scholars as the mother. She is often called the mother of the modern New Age movement. And as you can see, this was born in Masonic philosophy and teaching, founded and propagated by Freemasonry. Now, the woman that headed Theosophy after Madame Blavatsky was this lady, Annie Besant, and she worked with a man named Charles Leadbeater. Now, to the right, you see Miss Annie Besant in her co-Masonic regalia. And there are three pictures here of Mrs. Besant from three periods in her life. And there in her later years, she's in her co-Masonic regalia. And she worked with a man by the name of Charles Leadbeater, who was also a very famous 33rd degree Freemason. And this is a picture with the arrow pointing to Miss Annie Besant of a group of 33rd degree co-Masons, who, as I said, they had their charter off the Grand Orient of France. And these co-Masons were some of the real elite hard hitters in the occult world. They were the absolute kingpins of the occult in their day. People like Blavatsky and Besant and Leadbeater and people like this. And a lot of people don't realize that there were ever women involved in Freemasonry, but there certainly were. Now, Charles Leadbeater, this is the man that shared leadership in the Theosophical Society late in the life of Annie Besant. He was a 33rd degree Mason, and he believed that he was reincarnated. And that was one of the nicer things that Mr. Leadbeater believed. But this is what Mr. Leadbeater said on Freemasonry. This is from his book, Hidden Life in Freemasonry. The highest and last of the sacramental powers of the ancient mysteries which have been transmitted to us is that of the Sovereign Grand Inspector General, 33rd degree. The 33rd degree links the Sovereign Grand Inspector General with the spiritual king of the world himself. that mightiest of adepts who stands at the head of the great white lodge, in whose strong hands lie the destinies of the earth, and awakens the powers of the triple spirit as far as they can yet be awakened. And there was a real understanding that these people had that participation in Masonic ritual brought about the transmission of demonic force to the person. And this is something that they not only understood, but they sought after it. And this is from Charles Ledbetter's book, The Hidden Life in Freemasonry, page 336. He said this: "The 30th degree brings its angel also, of appropriate character, a great blue diva of the first ray, who lends his strength to the night KH, somewhat as the crimson angel assists the ex and perfect brother of the Rose Croix. The 33rd degree gives two such splendid fellow workers, spirits of gigantic size as compared to humanity, and radiantly white in color." And as you see, they would even describe the demons that they would receive in the various degrees of Freemasonry. And you talk about precise and advanced occultism, this is what it is. He goes on and says this: "Yet when one of these spirits is attached to us by a Masonic ceremony, we must not think of him either as a director or as an attendant, but simply as a brother." Isn't that sweet? If you pick up a demon during a Masonic ritual, just say brother, you know. But they realized the spiritual forces that were released through these occult pagan mystery religions. He goes on to say, "Our self-centeredness is so ingrained that when we hear of such a wonderful association, we at once think, however unconsciously, what we can gain by the relationship. What can we learn from this resplendent being? Will he guide us, advise us, protect us, or, on the other hand, is he a servant whom we can send to do our will?" And here we have the principle of all witchcraft and black magic, the control of evil spirits to do your will. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the New Age, the New World Order, and the coming one world religion. We have a book here, and this is something very interesting. And I hope you can see it. It might be a little hard for you to see, but this is a book called The Consciousness of the Atom by Alice Bailey. And Alice Bailey, more or less, took the mantle from Annie Besant as the leader in Theosophy. And they formed a publishing company in New York called Lucifer Publishing Company. And to this day, one of the most prestigious New Age organizations is Lucius Publishing Company. And right there, Larry's pointing to it on the same book. On there, where Larry pointed, it says Lucifer Publishing Company, and over here, Lucius Publishing Company. Both titles on the same book. And what is today known as the prestigious, and this used to have its office in the UN. It was originally founded as Lucifer Publishing Company. And that goes back to Madame Blavatsky's Lucifer magazine. And of course, this is just the belief that Lucifer is really a great guy that's going to bless your socks off in the occult, which is just Satan's original lie. But this is Alice Bailey's book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy. And it discusses religious orders in the New Age. And they told us a long time ago, this was written in the 40s, they told us what they were going to do, and they have done it. And still some people aren't getting it. But she said the three main channels through which the preparation for the New Age is going on might be regarded as the church, the Masonic fraternity, and the educational field. And that is exactly what they've done. They've went after the church, they've went after education, and they've done it through the lodge. All of them are as yet in relatively static condition, and all are as yet failing to meet the need and to respond to the inner pressure. But in all of these three movements, disciples of the great ones are to be found, and they are steadily gathering momentum and will before long enter upon their designated task. Now, this was written in the 40s, and we've got a fulfillment in our day of what she said back then. She goes on, the Masonic movement, when it can be divorced from politics and social ends and from its present paralyzing condition of inertia, will meet the need of those who can and should wield power. It is the custodian of the law. It is the home of the mysteries and the seat of initiation. It holds in its symbolism the ritual of deity, and the way of salvation is pictorially preserved in its work. Exactly what Manly P. Hall said, that the Rosicrucians took the ancient doctrine from the mysteries and embedded it into the ritual. The methods of deity are demonstrated in its temples, and under the all-seeing eye, the work can go forward. It is a far more occult organization than can be realized, and is intended to be the training school for the coming advanced occultist. In its ceremonials lies hid the coming advanced occultist. In its ceremonials is hid the wielding of the forces connected with the growth and life of the kingdoms of nature and the unfoldment of the divine aspects in man. In the comprehension of its symbolism will come the power to cooperate with the divine plan. Foster Bailey, who was the husband of Alice Bailey, was a 32nd degree Freemason who lectured extensively through lodge halls throughout America. This book, The Spirit of Masonry by Foster Bailey, is still sold by McCoy Publishing Company, and I appreciated what Dwayne said. Dwayne said he believed that there would be nothing sold by McCoy that would not be accurate reflection of Masonic thought, and I agree with that very much, what Dwayne said. But in this book, this is what Foster said: Masonry and the Universal Religion. It is not possible from a contemplation of this side of Masonic teaching that it may provide all that is necessary for the formulation of a universal religion. And I'm sorry, is it not possible? May it not be true, as has been said, that if all religions and scriptures were blotted out and Masonry were left in the world, we could still recover the great plan of salvation. Now, isn't that an awesome statement? You could throw out every religion and just keep Freemasonry, and you'd still have the plan of salvation. Most earnestly should all true Masons consider this point, and I really wish that they would consider that point, and I think if they would, some of them would get out. He goes on, a revitalized Masonry made up of Masons true to their obligations and realizing the mystic tie that binds them all together in one true brotherhood would also provide a platform so universal that it would meet the need of thinkers of all kinds and of every school of thought. It would thus not only meet the religious need by providing a universal religion, but would also satisfy the mental need felt by all broad-minded thinkers of this time. Foster Bailey, The Spirit of Masonry. So you can see how Freemasonry, through the New Age, is providing the platform for the coming one-world religion. Now, this is the September 1950 issue of the New Age magazine, the official organ of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and it contained an article entitled God's Plan in America. I'll read. You don't need much commentary here. There are 3 plans in action in America today, and they all have different purposes. The first plan is God's plan, a non-sectarian plan. The second is the Roman Catholic plan, and this is a denominational or sectarian plan. And the third is the communistic plan, an anti-capitalistic plan. God's plan is dedicated to the unification of all races, religions, and creeds. This plan, dedicated to the new order of things, is to make all things new. A new nation, a new race, a new civilization, and a new religion. A non-sectarian religion that has already been recognized and called the religion of the great light. And this, what they call God's plan, is actually Satan's plan. This is the same thing that was taught and passed down from Satan himself through the mystery religions into the reservoir of Masonry and brought down to us in America via Freemasonry. Now we'll read on. Just as Providence has chosen the Jewish race, the children of Israel, to bring into the world righteousness by carrying the 10 Commandments, which emphasize, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, so also Providence has chosen the Nordic race to unfold the new age of the world, a novus ordo seclorum. The Nordics are the highest branch of the 5th Aryan civilization. Did you know that? The Latins are the 4th Aryan civilization. I bet you didn't know that either. And the American race will be the 6th Aryan civilization. Now, where they're getting this from is the secret doctrine of Madame Blavatsky. And what this is the doctrine of the supremacy of the Aryan white race. The secret doctrine of Madame Blavatsky is the book that Adolf Hitler kept on his bedstand. This is the doctrine that fostered Aryanism, skinheads, the Ku Klux Klan, and by the way, also Albert Pike, while he was the head, the Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite, was also the head of the Ku Klux Klan in Arkansas. This is the racist Antichrist philosophy of the superiority of the Aryan white race. And this passed down through the Theosophical Masonic doctrine to Aryanism, on down to the Ku Klux Klan, on down to modern groups like the skinheads. We witnessed to a skinhead in Evansville, and the young man was converted and but went to a church there in Evansville and then went on to Bible school. I don't know what's happened to him. But the young man told us that the role the skinheads were to play is that they would be the foot soldiers of the New World Order. That is exactly the phrase he used, that the skinheads were aware that they would be the foot soldiers of the New World Order. But we want to talk a little bit about the role of Albert Pike. Albert Pike was Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite. He's responsible for the writing of the Scottish Rite journals. And in A Bridge to Light, published in 1988, this makes the role of Albert Pike quite clear. The current Sovereign Grand Commander, C. Fred Kleinknecht, wrote in the foreword, "The apex of our teachings are our rituals and morals and dogma, written by our beloved Sovereign Grand Commander, Albert Pike." And then this is in the foreword to A Bridge to Light. And of course, many Freemasons in the Scottish Rite, they like to say, you know, Mr. Pike, you know, he's back in the old days, we really don't honor him. And that certainly is not true, as an abundance of quotes could show. The January 1996 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal, the Ritual and Ceremonial Forms Committee announced that the rituals of the Scottish Rite were to be revised. What is the prime directive when revising the rituals? Quote, "The committee will hold all degrees to the highest standards regarding content and style. The criteria for this will include A, preservation of the content of the original Albert Pike ritual," unquote. This is a book entitled The Ku Klux Klan, The Fiery Cross by Wynne Craig Wade, published in 1987. It has been well reviewed by several news organizations, San Francisco Chronicle, the Houston Chronicle, the Boston Sun Globe, etc., etc. This is what it says. And here we're going to tie Mr. Pike to the Klan, which is easy to do. It's a well-known fact that they're hard-pressed to deny. After the Klan had spread outward from Tennessee, there wasn't the slightest chance of central control over it, a problem that would characterize the Klan throughout its long career. Prominent Southern gentlemen were later cited as state leaders of the invisible empire. Alabama claimed General John T. Morgan as Grand Dragon. Arkansas was headed by General Albert Pike, explorer and poet. Win Craig, the Fiery Cross. Now, going back here, now we've read this quote, so I'm going to skip this. This is going back to the quote that we had in the New Age magazine, which is talking about the Nordic and the Aryan race. So we've looked at this connection from Aryanism to Nazism through the skinheads, and this, of course, influenced a man by the name of Adolf Hitler, who rose to power in the 1930s. He was an occultist, and he was a member of two secret societies, the Thule Society and the Order of New Templars. Now, this was an interesting group that was founded by a disgruntled Freemason that took Masonic doctrine over into this German secret society, which is extremely dangerous. And of course, he promoted the superiority of the Aryan race. Now, is there a Masonic connection? And it's also well known, and I'm very much aware, that Hitler did persecute Freemasons and occultists. But it's also true that he was a member of secret societies and occultist himself. And it's also true that Stalin, who was his great fear, was also given birth and power by the secret societies. So it's kind of hard always to tell just exactly what's going on. But the occult and secret societies had a big role to play on all sides. But as you notice, here is a book that shows the swastika, the ancient mysteries in modern Masonry by Reverend Charles H. Vail, published by the McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply Company. And this, the swastika was used in a Masonic book published by McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply Company before it was adopted as the symbol for the Nazi Party. Is there a connection? Very interesting. Certainly some food for thought and something to think about. But when you realize that Mr. Hitler's rise to power was through Masonically connected and oriented secret societies, it does make one wonder. Now, this is a book entitled 10,000 Famous Freemasons. Henry Ford was raised in Palestine Lodge, number 357, Detroit, Michigan, on November 28, 1894. He received the 33rd degree September 1940. Now, Freemasonry, or Freemason Henry Ford wrote a series of articles which appeared in the Dearborn Independent discussing the Jewish problem. Hitler was quite taken with Henry and his writings. Ford's manufacturing techniques were adopted to build the German war machine. Hitler awarded Ford the highest civilian honor which could be invested upon a foreign national. Now, here's another very interesting thing that was in a book by Foster Bailey, Running God's Plan, published by Lucis Publishing Company, and just try to figure out who Mr. Bailey is talking about. It says this, and this is talking about the establishment of the ultimate New Age plan, as Masonry would call God's plan. It says this: one attempt was to begin by uniting the peoples living in the Rhine River Valley, using that river as a binding factor. It was an attempt by a disciple, but did not work. Now another attempt is in full swing, namely the Six Nation European Common Market. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out who he's talking about. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the move from the World Council of Churches through cooperation with pagans to the rise of the prophet and Antichrist. And we've got about 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to hurry as much as I can to get through the most of it. But this is pagan worship around the Masonic altar. And this is from the Louisiana Monitor. To the altar of Freemasonry, all men bring their most votive offerings. Around it, all men, whether they have received their teachings from Confucius, Zoroaster, Moses, Mohammed, or the founder of the Christian religion, just so long as they believe in the fatherhood of God and the universality of the brotherhood of man, meet upon a common level. And this is from a book by a man that spoke at our conference a couple times. A lot of us know him, a great brother, Carrico. And this is what Gary says in his book on Road to Global Occupation. He says this: using this cover of working for worldwide Christian unity, Weishaupt was able to gain the backing of numerous credulous leaders who thought they were working for a noble cause. In fact, their every move was designated by Weishaupt to nudge the Illuminists one step closer to world domination. I can think of more than a few Christian leaders who could learn a lesson from this. Christian unity is not something that can be organized. It comes naturally among those who share a common love for Christ. The false ecumenical interfaith unity being promoted today by the World Council of Churches, an organization that is strongly influenced by Freemasonry, is nothing new. It has been used for centuries to try to further the cause of world government. As long as Christians do not unite with the peoples of other religions, there can be no world government. You can applaud now. This unwillingness of Christians to compromise their faith has been the chief obstacle for the conspirators, thank God. This is an article that Larry got out of the Indianapolis Star. And this shows a very contemporary outworking of what we're talking about. What's the date on this, Larry? July 23rd, 1988. And it says 1998. Yeah. And it says this: the Church Federation of Greater Indianapolis Rally will be at 3:30 p.m. Saturday in Martin Luther King Jr. Park. Prayer vigils at 1:30 p.m. at the 350 sites of slayings since 1990 will kick off this event. People will gather at 1 p.m. for the vigils at the 23 sites. On Saturday at 3:30 p.m., Patricia Freeman Dorson will stand in the middle of Martin Luther King Jr. Park and blow a shofar, the ram's horn that Jews use to call one another to prayer. But her music will call Christians and Muslims too, and Buddhists, Hindus, and Baha'is. They are gathering in the park for a citywide peace rally in remembrance of men, women, and children murdered in Indianapolis. And this is just one example of many things all around the country that we're seeing. Now, Christ is not the common denominator. And here's a list of the people that participated in this. 8 Catholic parishes, 2 Jewish synagogues, 2 Presbyterian churches, and you can see we've got Episcopal, Methodist, Lutheran, and on and on and on, along with the Buddhists, Muslims, Hindus, Baha'is. So it's not hard to figure what's going on. Now we're going to go quickly over to the other side, and we're going to look at the Rosicrucians, Angelica, Golden Dawn, and we're going to come down very quickly through the hardcore cult. Now, the modern society of Rosicrucians was given its present form by Robert Wentworth Little in 1865, who, with other zealous Masons, founded the order following the reputed discovery of certain manuscripts in the archives of the Grand Lodge. And as that other slide showed, and I'm going to skip a few slides here because we just don't have time to go through all of it, but as the other slide showed, the Rosicrucians Angelica was considered an actual Masonic group because you had to be a Master Mason to be a part of it. And from the Rosicrucians Angelica was spawned the major league occultist of the modern day. And we're going to talk briefly about one of the groups, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was formed by prominent members of the Society of Rosicruciana in Anglica. And I just butchered that, didn't I? But you get the idea. Now, the founders of the Golden Dawn. As far as England is concerned, without a doubt, we must seek for its origins in the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. This was an organization formulated in 1865 by eminent Freemasons, some of them claiming Rosicrucian initiation from continental authorities. Among those who claimed such initiation was one Kenneth Mackenzie, a Masonic scholar and encyclopedist. The first chief of this society, its supreme magus so-called, was one Robert Wentworth Little, who is said to have rescued some old rituals from a certain Masonic storeroom. And it was from certain of those papers that the society's rituals were elaborated. He died in 1878, and in his stead was appointed Dr. William R. Woodman. And here's a picture of the three fellows that were the founders. Both Dr. Westcott and McGregor Mathers were prominent and active members of this body. And there we have Mr. Woodman, Mr. Westcott, and here's a guy that could have been a member of the Clinton cabinet, S.L. McGregor Mathers, out there on the far right. Now, Satan's wellspring of paganism, we've come all the way down from the fall of Lucifer to the Grand Lodge, and here we're going to look a little bit about the Rosicrucian influence within Freemasonry. And here you see on the right a picture of the Baphomet, which was drawn by this man here, Eliphas Levi, who was a prominent 19th century Freemason. And as I said earlier, the group of Voltaire, Casanova, and those boys in 18th century France, this gave birth to this fella in 19th century France, and he was a real bridge and a tremendous influence on a man by the name of Albert Pike. But these two seals, if you study Masonic symbolism, on the cover of the book, the Seal of Solomon, which appears in Bridge to Light and is expounded upon by Mr. Albert Pike, and also the Baphomet. These are two symbols that were drawn by this man, Eliphas Levi, who is a member of Rosicrucian Angelica. And here is a picture of Mr. Levi. In the center is Bridge to Light, 1988, Scottish Rite publication. And over on the far right is a picture from Bridge to Light showing this symbol of Mr. Levi in this 1988 Scottish Rite publication. And here is the explanation of it from Bridge to Light. It says, we find another explanation in the lecture for the Rose Croix degree. The serpent, the Phoenicians deemed to be immortal, becoming young by entering into and consuming himself. Hence, the serpent in a circle, holding his tail in its mouth, was an emblem of eternity. And further, in the lecture for this degree, there is a life principle of the world, a universal agent, wherein are two natures and a double current of love and wrath. Pay attention. It is the body of the Holy Spirit, the universal agent, the serpent devouring his own tail. Now, he is calling that serpent swallowing its own tail the Holy Spirit. Now, if you don't know we have a big problem here, you're not paying attention. This is blasphemy of the most irksome and vile kind, propagated right out of Scottish Rite literature. Now, here we have an interesting thing, and I want you to just look a little bit. Here in the Baphomet, the right hand going up to the white moon symbolizes the right-hand path. The left hand down to the dark moon symbolizes the left-hand path. This goes back to Zoroastrian and Luciferian dualism of the right-hand path and the left-hand path. And of course, there's no such thing as good white witchcraft and bad black witchcraft. It's all summoning demons. But in the center is the jewel of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. And I want you to note very quickly, on the left side of the jewel of the 33rd degree, the little arm and the hand coming out. And there in the side, Larry has given a cutoff slide of the hand from the 33rd degree jewel right beside the hand from the left-hand path of the Baphomet. Coincidence? After you study this stuff for a while, you know that it's no coincidence. Now, we're going to look briefly here at how the Golden Dawn, and I mean very briefly, how the Seal of Solomon from Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry compares with the emblem of the Theosophical Society. And as you can see, the interlocking triangles, the snake swallowing its tail, we have an inverted swastika. The similarity between these symbols is unmistakable. And here we're going to compare the emblem of the Theosophical Society with the seal of the Inner Order of the Golden Dawn. And once again, the similarity between these symbols, they're unmistakable, of the common origin. And we're going to look real quick here at a man named Aleister Crowley. He was a member of the Golden Dawn. After being expelled, Crowley formed his own order in 1907. He used amended versions of the Golden Dawn rituals. While in India, Crowley encountered Aiwas, one of the secret chiefs. Through a medium, Aiwas dictated the Book of the Law, which became the basis of Crowley's later teachings. The Ordo Templar Orientis, OTO, is an initiatic body composed of men and women who have accepted the principles of the Book of the Law. And if you've ever read Crowley's Book of the Law, you know this is dangerous stuff. But this is a ritual. Crowley's public performance of the Rites of Eleusis in a London auditorium in 1909 brought him widespread notoriety. And here we see on the left Mr. Crowley in his 33rd degree Masonic regalia, and in the right is an artist's depiction of a perverted ritual that he did in public in a London theater. Now, if he would do this in public, you could imagine what he would do in private. Aleister Crowley, Baphomet. Crowley referred to himself as the Beast and also as Baphomet. The sigil of Baphomet is a symbol well known to witches and Satanists. Now, this is a sweet piece of slide work by Larry. The sigil of Baphomet finds prominent use in Scottish Rite Freemasonry today. And here's Mr. Fred Kleinknecht. And you see on his hat the symbol of the Knights Templar Cross, which was the sigil of Baphomet, which Mr. Crowley put by his name. And as you see, this is also by the signature of Mr. Fred Kleinknecht, and the Supreme Commander of the Scottish Rite wears this upon his head when he sits on the seat of the throne at the House of the Temple. A.E. Waite, leader of the Golden Dawn's mystical faction in its waning years, controlled the Isis Urania Temple in London from 1903 until it closed in 1914. Waite designed the Golden Dawn tarot cards, the deck most commonly used today. The builders of 1914, when it was written at the request of the Grand Lodge of Iowa, stated that Freemason Waite was the greatest student in the field of esoteric teaching and method. A 3-page tribute followed. Now, here we're going to show the connection from the Golden Dawn down to modern witchcraft. Gerald Gardner, 1884 to 1964, was initiated in the New Forest Coven. Gardner is considered by many as the father of modern witchcraft. Gardner's work, Book of Shadows, is traditionally copied out by hand by very new witches from his or her initiator's version. Freemasonry, OTO, and witchcraft. The rituals of New Forest Coven were initially fragmentary. Gardner set about making them into a workable whole by filling the gaps with material he regarded as suitable from other sources, such as Freemasonry, the writings of Aleister Crowley, and the odd Kipling poem. And there's a tape available we did at a conference where Bill Schneblin did a presentation comparing Masonic initiation with witchcraft initiation. Alex and Maxine Saunders were initiated in the Gardnerian tradition. Alexandrian witchcraft is an offshoot of one of Gardner's covens. They continue in the Gardnerian tradition. Both Gerald Gardner and Alex Saunders, the two big names in modern witchcraft, they were Freemasons. Now, this is a book that shows the connection between Freemasonry and Satanism, the Satanic Rituals by Anton Sandor LaVey. Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan. The Satanic Rituals documents the rites of Lucifer. Satanists worship self rather than Satan. We could talk about that for a while. It says this: Satanic ritual is a blend of Gnostic, Kabbalistic, Hermetic, and Masonic elements. Anton Sandor LaVey. That's getting it right from the horse's mouth, that there's a connection between Freemasonry and Satanism. Now, this is also from the Satanic Rituals. La El Espace, one of the rites of Lucifer, is known as the ceremony of the stifling air. The ceremony of the stifling air is the rite which was performed when entering the 6th degree of the Order of the Knights Templar. A striking American parallel in this rite to this rite is enacted within the mosques of the ancient Arabic order of the Noble of the Mystic Shrine, an order reserved for 32nd degree Masons. The nobles have gracefully removed themselves from any implication of a heresy by referring to the place beyond the Devil's Pass as the domain where they might worship at the shrine of Islam. And that shows us that there's just a quick step and a few changes from blatant satanic ritual to shrine ritual. And we've got here Mormonism, Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, both Freemasons. And we'll just read here. Freemasons have been influential in the foundation of several of the world's cults. Mormonism. Joseph Smith was a Mason. Much of the Mormon temple ritual was taken from Masonic ritual. Symbols of Freemasonry are found on Mormon underwear. Smith gave the grand hailing sign as the mob which killed him attacked the jail where he was being held. Freemasons have been influential in the foundation of several of the world's cults. Christian Science. Mary Baker Eddy was married to a man named George Glover. Glover died of yellow fever in Charleston, South Carolina. A last request was that his brother Masons see her safely to her father's house in the north. And this is from the life of Mary Baker Eddy by Sybil Wilbur from the Christian Science Publishing Company. Freemasons have been influential in the foundation of several of the world's cults. Jehovah's Witnesses. Charles Taz Russell was a Mason, according to Edith Starr Miller, Occult Theocracy. Early Watchtower publications contained the crown and cross symbol used by the Knights Templar. And here's our thesis statement. Satan is alive and is at work in the world to bring about his master plan. His influence can be seen as a series of threads which run in a convoluted fashion through various groups over time. These threads were woven in a common fabric of evil. Few organizations have been influenced by Satan to a greater degree than the organization of Freemasonry. Freemasonry has spawned numerous other occult organizations. When history is examined, it is obvious that Satan has used Freemasons to further many of his purposes. Freemasonry is a wellspring of paganism. Thank you very much.